Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf 9 of Masechta Sheqalim. The Gemara begins over here with a continuation of our discussions of wine, and that'll get us to the next Mishnah at the bottom of Amud Aleph, and then we will wrap up the third parak of Masechta Sheqalim. Let us jump in. We are on 6 lines into the page in Daf Tes Amud Aleph. So I think you have to read it with these parentheses. So Tana Yavish Kazayis Did Reb Nosson. So when you have wine that is dried out, congealed wine, so the shear for taking it out on Shabbos is a Kazayis. So Rabbanan to Kesai Reb Yossi Bar Bibi B'Shem Shmuel Asid Reb Nosson Krib Shimon. So the Rabbanan to Kesai and Reb Yossi Bar Bibi the same Shmuel in the name of Shmuel said that Reb Nosson's opinion that congealed wine, the shear is a kazayas, so it's Reb Shimon. He holds like Reb Shimon. Kimad Reb Shimon Omar, like Reb Shimon said, Revius. Reb Shimon said that if you have a revius of liquid wine, so we're saying that when Reb Nosson says that if you have a kazayas of congealed wine, a kazayas of congealed wine is really the same measure of a revius of liquefied wine, and when it congeals, it will congeal into a kazayis. So when it congeals, it'll have a kazayis. Reb Simon b'shem Reb Yeshua ben Levi says Reb Simon in the name of Reb Yeshua ben Levi Ma'aseh appeared as Rebbe Shemesa that there was a story that the mule of Rebbe died. V'tiaru es dama, and they said that its blood is tahor, even though the blood of an Avela should be tameh, but they said that the blood of this mule in Rebbe's house that died was tahor. Mishum, right? V'tiaru is dama mishum nevela. They said it's tahor. Don't worry about tumas nevela. V'shal Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Elazar sub Simon ad kama v'lo ashkach be. And Rabbi Elazar asked Rabbi Simon, "Is there like a cap to this tahor blood? Meaning, when we say that this blood of this mule is tahor, like any amount, or only a specific amount is tahor, but after that amount it would be tameh." And Reb Simon basically ignored Reb Elazar. So Vishal Reb Yeshua ben Levi. So Reb Elazar went and asked Reb Yeshua ben Levi. V'amale ad revius tahor yosem revius tameh. And Reb Yeshua ben Levi says, yeah, when we say that this blood of the mule is tahor, it means up to a revius, but more than a revius would be tameh. Uvash Reb Elazar al delochazer le Reb Simon shmuasa. And Reb Elazar was insulted that Reb Simon did not respond to his inquiry when he asked about the amount of blood that would be tameh by this dead mule. Reb Bibi Abba Yosef Masni Hadein Uvda, and Reb Bibi was sitting and he was teaching this sugya. He was teaching about the dead mule of Rebbe's house, where they said that the blood was tahor. Amalei Reb Yitzchak Bar Bisna. So Reb Yitzchak Bar Bisna said to Reb Bibi, "Kohena ad revius tahor yosem mikan tameh." And so Reb Yitzchak Bar Bisna, so he asked Reb Bibi, and he said, when we say that this blood is tahor, does it mean only up to a revius, but more than a revius would be tameh? Uvad be. And Reb Bibi kind of was not really paying much attention to him. So Amalei Reb Zrika begin to show lach at boad be. What? So Reb Zrika says to Reb Bibi, says what? Just because somebody asked you a question, you're getting upset, you're getting flustered? So Amalei begin to avadaiti bi bo'itna. So Reb Bibi says, "Oh no, sorry, it's because I was distracted. That's why I got frustrated." Bo'itna be. The Amar Reb Chanan vayu chayachat tzlum l'cha mineged, because Reb Chanan teaches the following pasuk that it says that your life will be hanging opposite you. Zeshel ke'achitim l'shana. That is somebody who buys wheat for a year, meaning somebody who doesn't own his own property, and therefore he's dependent upon buying his wheat. And so he buys wheat for a year at a time. And you'll be scared night and day. Zelokeach min asidki. That's somebody who can't afford to buy enough wheat for a whole year, and he doesn't have his own property, so he buys wheat in like little amounts. And you won't even be able to have any security in your life. That's somebody who has so little money that he can't even buy little bits at a time. He just has to buy directly from the bakery, hand to mouth. And says Bivi, this is me. I rely upon the baker. I have so little money that I mamish live hand to mouth. And he says that because he was distracted thinking about this teaching, that's why he didn't react properly to Bar Bisna, Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Bisna. So Ma'u Kidun knew. So then, but Lemais at the end of the day, so what's the halacha? When it comes to, by the mule of Rebbe, we said the blood was tar. Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Bisna asked Rabbi Bivi, is that only up to a Revius it's tar, but more so it would be Tameh? So hey, Rabbi Yoshua ben Psora, Adam Nevela, Shu tar. So we say, well, we have a brisa in which Rabbi Yoshua ben Psora says that the blood of Nevela is tahor. So we see that the blood of this mule must have been completely tahor, even if it was more than a Revius, which is unlike what Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi said. Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi said that it's only up to Revius, but more than a Revius, it would be Tameh. But apparently you have a brisa here that says that according to Rabbi Yoshua ben Psora, any blood of Nevela is tahor at any amount. So the Gemara says, no, it doesn't mean at any amount. It means ma'u tar mila achshir. No, it means that it will not be machshir things the kabel tumah. We've learned about being machshir the kabel tumah. It means that anything that can become tameh first needs to come in contact with water. And therefore the question is, this blood of a nevela, if it comes in contact with, let's say, wheat or something like that, is that wheat now able to contract tumah based on the fact that it came in contact with liquid? So we're saying no. We're saying that, so we want to say what it means, that when Rabbi Yoshua ben Psora says that dam nevela is tar, it means that it will not make other things susceptible to becoming tameh. But it does become tameh. Kilu, the blood of the nevela itself becomes tameh. So tamataninon. So the Gemara says, yeah, but what do you mean? We learned over there. Where's over there? Machshirin. Ooh, that sounds like a fun mesechta. Dama sheretz kivsaro mitame ve'eno machshir. That the blood of a sheretz is like the flesh of a sheretz, meaning that it can be mitame things. It itself can be tameh and be mitame, but it won't be machshir other things the kabel tuma. Ve'ein lanu kayotze bo. And then the Mishnah says, and this is the only example of that. So what do we see? So we see that the only example of something that itself is tameh and is not machshir other things the kabel tuma is the blood of a sheretz, implying that the blood of a nevela would be machshir other things the kabel tuma, or at least wouldn't be this same case of a sheretz, which is that it itself is tameh, but it's unable to be machshir other things the kabel tuma, because as we said, ve'ein kayotze bo, that there's no other example of this. So therefore, when Rabbi Yoshua ben Psora says that the blood of a nevela is tahor, it means completely tahor. Not just that it's not machshir other things the kabel tuma, because that's something that's unique to sheretz. The Gemara says not necessarily. V'shir tumaso shedamo mitame kivsaro. No, what it means, sheretz is unique in the amount that it's able to be mitame other things at the size of a lentil, which is something that's unique to sheretz. But in terms of the concept of something that's able to become tameh while not being able to be machshir other things the kabel tuma, you could say that applies to dam nevela as well, and it's not unique to sheretz. Alright. Rabbi Yossi plige ba train amura'in. Rabbi Yossi says, look, Lamaisa, we have machlokas amura'in about this. Chad omer tameh v'chad omer tar. One of them says that it's tameh when it's more than a revius. That was Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. The other one says that it's takatar. Manda omer tameh Rabbi Yehuda, Manda omer tar Rabbi Yoshua ben Psora. So Manda omer says that it's tameh, it's like Rabbi Yehuda, and we're about to explain how we know that it's Rabbi Yehuda. And the Manda omer says that it starts like Rabbi Yoshua ben Psora, right? We just saw that Rabbi Yoshua ben Psora says that when it comes to the blood of a nevela, it's tar at any amount. So that's Rabbi Yoshua ben Psora's opinion. And Rabbi Yehuda's opinion would be that when there's more than a revius of dam nevela, it would be tameh, but up to a revius, it would be tar. Amr le, what? Yeah, Amr le Rav Avduma de Menechusa V'Yos, and this taka makes sense to say that according to Rabbi Yehuda, more than a revius of blood of a nevela would be tameh. To Rabbi Yehuda Moryana de Venesia Hava. That's extremely interesting. That Rabbi Yehuda was the posek of the house of Rebbe, and therefore we're talking about the mule of Rebbe that died, and it was less than a revius, and we're saying that it's tahor, but if it's more than a revius, it's tameh. It would make sense to say that that's in line with Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, because Rabbi Yehuda was the posek in the house of Rebbe. Super interesting. Remember that. It's very, very interesting. So the Mishnah continues, and the Mishnah had said that the fellow who goes in to do the Trumas Halishka shouldn't be wearing any hems or anything that we could possibly suspect that he might be hiding some money somewhere. So it says the Gemara, Tani Rabbi Shmuel kavutz lo yisrem mipnei hachashad. Says Rabbi Shmuel that somebody with long hair does not go in to do the Trumas Halishka because we don't want anybody to suspect that maybe he's hiding coins in his hair. That the treasurers would then sort of go through each strand of the fellow's wool clothing to make sure that there's no coins hiding in there. And we learn in a brisa that they would speak to the fellow who was doing the Trumas Halishka the entire time, from the time that he enters until the time that he leaves, that he wouldn't be able to hide any money in his mouth. Why doesn't he just fill his mouth with water the whole time? And then he won't be able to put anything in his mouth. It'll just be filled with water. So Tanchuma, well, because he needs to make a bracha when he separates the Trumas Halishka, and he can't do that if his mouth is filled with water. Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachman b'shem Rabbi Yonasan b'Torah v'Anavim v'Ksuvim matzonu shadam tzarich lotzei sidei abrios k'derech shu tzarich lotzei sidei amakom. So says Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachman in the name of Rabbi Yonasan that we see a precedent for this concept of shadam tzarich lotzei sidei abrios, that a person needs to be, make sure that no other humans suspect him of any improper acting, just like he has to be concerned that the Eibishter shouldn't see that he's doing anything improper. We see this in the Torah, in the Nevi'im, and in the Ksuvim. But Torah Minayin, where do we see it in the Torah? As the pasuk says, by the Ruvain, Gad, and Chatzishevet Menashe, that it says, "V'yisem nikim Hashem Yisrael," that you'll go and you'll fight in the in the front lines, and then nobody will suspect you of not wanting to live in Eretz Yisrael. You'll be clean from God and from Israel. Not just from God, but also from Israel. But Nevi'im, it says in the prophets, Minayin, where does it say that? Tichsev, as the pasuk says, Kel Elokim Hashem. What does the pasuk say? Hu Yodea v'Yisrael Hu Yeda. That God knows and the Yidden also knows. Baksuvim, and in the writings it says, Minayin Tichsev umatzachen v'seichato b'nei Elokim v'Adam, and you will find favor and intuition in the eyes of God and man. Kamliel Zuga Shal Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbun Ezu Mechuver Shebechulim. What's sort of the best of the three psukim? Amalei V'Yisim Nikim Hashem Yisrael. So he said that the best one is the one from the Torah, which is that you'll be clean from God and from Israel. Very, very interesting concept there. I mean, it's cool. Next, Mishnah Halacha Gimel of the third parak of Masechta Sheqalim Shal Beis Rabban Gamliel. We had learned this the other day that in Rabbi Gamliel's household, they wanted to make sure that the shekels that they donated would be included in the Trumas Halishka, right? Because they would fill up 3 boxes, and whatever was left over would stay there. It was left over. So Rabbi Gamliel's household, they wanted to make sure that the shekels that they donated were going to be used for korbanos. So what they would do is, so they would enter into the Beis Hamikdash, and they would have their shekels for the machzas hashekel on their fingertips, so that nobody should suspect that they're going in to take any for any wrong reasons. It's clear that they're going in to donate their shekel. They would throw it in front of the person who was doing the Trumas Halishka, and the person separating the Trumas Halishka would make sure that the coin would be included in the coins that would make it into the box. Okay, protexia. And the process of the Truma Salishka is, it would all start out with the fellow who does the Truma Salishka saying, okay, I'm ready. I'm going to do the Truma Salishka now. And they say to him, Trom, Trom, Trom. They say 3 times, okay, do it. Shalosh Paimim. So then, as we know, they would do the Truma Salishka 3 times throughout the year. So after the first time, they would fill up the 3 boxes, and whatever was left over, they would take a leather covering, and they would cover whatever was left over, because whatever was left over each time, you would not use the next time. So it's not like the next time they do Truma Salishka, they're just going to fill up another 3 boxes from whatever was left over from the first time. No, they would use whatever coins were donated since subsequent to the first time. That's what they would use the second time. So they would cover up whatever was remaining after the first Truma. They would cover it with a leather covering, so that there would be a separation between them and whatever new coins would come in. Then the next Truma would come from the second batch of coins. Hashniya v'chipa b'katav lios. And then after the second Truma Salishka, they would also cover whatever was remaining from there with leather coverings. Hashlishis lo'ay mechape. And the third time, after doing the third Truma, they wouldn't have to cover up the remaining coins, because they weren't going to be taking out any new coins anymore anyways. How come they would cover up the coins after the Truma? Shema yishkach v'yisom min hadavar atarum, so that they shouldn't come to make a mistake and accidentally do Truma Salishka from the coin, the next time, from the coins that were already there the previous time and just weren't taken. They did the first Truma Salishka with the intention, with the kavanah of the people living in Eretz Yisrael. And the second Truma Salishka was for the cities surrounding Israel. And the third Truma Salishka was for Babylon, l'shem Madai and Media, l'shem Medinos Harechokos, and for the far away places. That by the house of Rabbi Gamliel, so they would make sure that they chap the Ryan and they would get their Sheqalim into the contributions. So ilu ayushne kriyim v'tar me'echad me'en al chavero shem lo pater chavero. So fact the Gemara, what's the big deal? How come his family was so adamant that their coins had to make it into specifically into the coins that were selected, and they can't be shirayim? If I have 2 piles of grain, and I take, Meiser and Trumeh from 1 pile, obviously it's going to work for the whole, all of your grain. You don't have to take from every single pile. It's not so important that specifically that grain or that pile the tithe came from. The point is that it counts for everybody. And the same thing by Machzis HaShekel. They fill up these boxes from whatever coins are in the Lishka, but it counts for everybody, not just for the people whose coins technically got taken. So how come Rabbi Gamliel had to make sure that his coins were davka taken? So look what the Gemara answers. Ein achinami, the Gemara says. Ein achinami. Meker adin. Yeah, they'll be just as yotzei even if their coins ended up in the shiraim. But it's not as gishmak. They wanted to get a cheshek from the mitzvahs, a gishmak out of the mitzvahs. And therefore, it's much more, gishmak to know that your coin is actually going to be used to buy the korbanos tzibor and these important things. So, yeah, ein achinami, meker adin, they would be just as yotzei had their coins been part of the leftovers. But it's not as exciting. They wanted to be excited about the mitzvahs and see that their coin was davka included. Tani, shomates akatavliyos naisa kulan shiraim. So what happens if one of these leather coverings kind of slips off and then some of the coins got mixed together? So we say that all of them now get treated like the shiraim, and depending on how you treat the shiraim, kilu maker adit, mistama, we're going to assume that you can't use any of them anymore. So if some of the coins get mixed together, they're basically, none of them are usable. Is trios shows, where am I? Fine. Tani, it was taught, Shlishis hi haisa ashira shebechulan. Now the third collection was the wealthiest of all of them. Now we had seen way back when at the beginning of Masech Sheqalim that there was taka machlokas about if the coins were they would get to Jerusalem at different times or all at the same time. But whatever it is, it's plausible to assume, at least, let's say, that the coins from further away places will be arriving later. And we had also taught that they would take the coins and use more expensive coins to consolidate so that there was less for them to schlep. And therefore, when the later donations, which were coming from further away places, the coins that they would bring would be more valuable coins because, they would consolidate. So, Shahayuba Istrios Shazav Vidarkonos Shazahuv. Okay, they had these more expensive coins. Tani, it was taught Tarimis Arishonim L'Shem Eretz Yisrael U L'Shem Kol Yisrael. It was taught in the Brisa that the first Trumas Halishka was for the people living in Eretz Yisrael, but also for all of Israel. Meaning they had in mind all of Israel. Shniya L'Shem Krachim HaMukafim U L'Shem Kol Yisrael. The second Trumas Halishka was for the walled cities. It was for the cities like surrounding Eretz Yisrael, but also for all the Yidden. Vashlishis l'shem Bavel u'Mader l'shem Medinos Harechokos u'l'shem Kol Yisrael. And the third Trumas Halishka was for the people in Bavel and Madai and all the faraway places, and of course also for all of Israel. Tani, it was taught Natos Harishona Afal Pi sheyesh barishona Nota min hashniya. So they would take money from the Trumas Halishka and they would use it for the korbanos, and before they would run out entirely, they would already start taking from the second box that they filled up. Of course, they filled up 3 boxes each time. So before they completely depleted the first box, they would already start taking from the second box. Noto min hashniya afal pi sheyesh bashniya noto min hashlishis. And then they started using the coins from the second box, and before they completely depleted the second box, they began to use the coins from the third box. Then once the third box was used completely, they went back to use what was left from the second box. Once they completely depleted the second box, they went back to using the first box. And if they managed to deplete the funds from all 3 boxes, so then they can now start using the new coins that were collected since the last Trumas Halishka, right? So if there are new coins coming in, so you can use those, but don't use don't use the leftovers. Reb Meir Omer chozer l'shirayim. Reb Meir says the Yitaka can use the leftovers. Reb Meir's opinion is that the leftover coins, i.e. the coins that didn't get put in the boxes when they were doing the Trumas Halishka, so Reb Meir says that actually there's a din me'ilah by them. If you get benefit from them, it's the din, you bring an asher me'ilos, because for this exact reason, because you may have a need for them if you run out of the funds from the boxes. So this is very geschmack. First of all, who was Reb Pinchas ben Yair? Reb Shimon ben Yochai's father-in-law. And this, friends, is the introduction to the Sefer of Mesilas Yesharim. Here we go. Reb Pinchas ben Yair Omer. This is what Reb Pinchas ben Yair would say. Zrizus mevi'el de nikius. I don't know, what's Zrizus? Being fastidious, I guess, excited about mitzvahs, brings you to cleanliness. Nikius mevi'el de taire. Cleanliness brings you to holiness. Tyra mevi'el de kedusha. Wait, what? No, purity. Tyra is purity. Purity brings you to holiness. Kedusha mevi'el de anave. Holiness brings you to humility. Anave mevi'el de yiras chet. Humility brings you to fearing sin. Yiras chet mevi'el de chasidus. And fearing sin brings you to chasidut. Chasidut mevi'el de ruach hakodesh. Chasidus brings you to having the Holy Spirit. Having the Holy Spirit brings you to bringing back the dead. And Tchias HaMesim brings you to Eliyahu Hanavi, Zachur Latov. So Zrizos brings to Nikius because it says V'chila, he will finish, i.e. he'll be zealous, maybe is that the word? I don't know. And then he'll have Kapara, which I guess is cleanliness. Nikios mevili de taire. So cleanliness brings you to purity. It says v'chiper aleh hakohen v'tahera, that he'll have cleanliness and then atonement, which I guess is cleanliness, and then purity. Tara mevila de kedusha dechsev v'taro v'kiddusho. Did I read that correctly? V'tiaro v'kidsho. These letters are too small. Okay, v'tiaro v'kidsho. Kedusha mevila de anove, and then holiness brings you to humility. Dechsev, as the pasuk says, ki cho amar ram v'nisa shochen ad v'kadosh shmo marum v'kadosh eshkon v'ezdaka u'shvaruach. Right, that it says, I live upon high. It says right, Shochen and Marim v'kadosh shmo, and then it says right, Marim v'kadosh eshkon, and then it says v'ezdaka u'shvaruach, that there's kedusha leads to humility. Anova mevili de yiras ched dichsiv ekev anova yiras Hashem. Okay. Yiras ched mevili de chsidus dichsiv v'chesed Hashem me'olam v'ad olam al yireav, that there's chesed on those who fear Him. Chsidus mevili de ruach hakodesh dichsiv az dibarta b'chazon chasidecha ruach. Then you spoke in a vision to those chasidim. Ruach hakodesh mevili de tchias hamesim dichsiv v'nasati ruchi bachem v'chyisem. Tchias hamesim mevili de Eliyahu zachulatov dichsiv hine anochi sholeach lachem s'Eliya anavi lifnei bayom Hashem agod v'anora. Wow. Tana b'shem Rav Meir, who saw in the name of Rav Meir, kol misha kavua be'eretz Yisrael, anybody who's got his residence in Eretz Yisrael, medaber b'lashon hakodesh, and speaks in the holy language, v'ochel peirosa b'tayra, and he eats his fruits in purity, v'kor kriyas shema b'boker v'erev, and he reads kriyas shema in the morning and at night, yemavusar sheben olam haba'u, so he will be announced that he is a person of the world to come. I feel like all of those are kind of doable. The hardest one there, I think we could probably mostly agree on, is eating peirosa b'tayra. You're making sure that you eat even chulin b'tayra. That's like, I feel like we're not so makbid on that these days. But living in Eretz Yisrael and what were the other things? Saying Kriya Shema and speaking Hebrew. My Hebrew's okay, but those parts are like more doable, I think. But the peiros b'tayra is probably a little bit more complicated. Hadron Olach Perek B'Shlosha Prakim. So, alright, we'll come back to you. Perek Shlosha Prakim. Now, moving on to the fourth Perek. Hatruma ma'ayu osin ba. So what would they do with this money that they would take from the Lishka? Lokrim ba tmidin u'musafin, the korban tamids and the musafs, v'niskeim, and their libations, ha'omer, the korban omer on the second day of Pesach, v'shtei alechem, and the two breads that they would bring on Shavuos, v'lechem aponim, and the weekly breads, v'chol korbanos atzibor, and all communal offerings. Shomei svichim b'shvius noten tzchayin v'chumas halishka. On Shvius, on Shemitah, of course, you're not allowed to work the field. Now, that would make it complicated because the Shtei Alechem and the Omer need to come from the Chodesh. They need to come from the new crop. Now, on Shemitah, there isn't very much new crop. So they would have people who would, you're not allowed to sort of guard produce on Shemitah because it has to be Hefker. So there would be people who would just kind of like keep their eye on certain grains that just kind of grew on their own, that weren't specifically planted because you're not allowed to plant on Shemitah, but there's what's called svichen, aftergrowths, things that, in the previous harvest, some seeds fell on the ground, they just kind of sprouted up on their own. So there were people who would kind of keep their eye out for these aftergrowths, and if somebody wanted to chop it, they would kindly request, like, hey, can you keep these for the Omer and Shtei Alechem? So these people would be paid from the Trumas Halishka. Rabbi Yossi Omer Afarotzim Misnadiv Shomer Chinam, says Rabbi Yossi that also, by the way, if you want to volunteer for this job and not take money from the Trumas Halishka, that would also be acceptable. Amrulo, the Chacham said to Rabbi Yossi, Afata Omer she'ein boed ela mishel tzibor, in which the Rabbanim responded and said, no, what do you mean that you can just volunteer? No, you have to take from the communal offerings. You have to be a paid person to do this if you're going to do it properly. Well, that was Daf Tes of Masechta Sheqalim. We discussed some of the halachas of wine and minimum shurim for wine. We learned very interestingly that Rabbi Yehuda was the posek of the house of Rebbe, which was super cool. And we then also saw that super interesting brisa from Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair, which is also the introduction and the basis for the Sefer Mesilas Yesharim, which is very, very cool. Have a good day. Peace out.